mate. You all right?
Yeah, getting there.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. It's been a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, it just seemed to drop off the edge of things. Like life just suddenly went, oh, do lots of other things at the minute and not have time to do any of it. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've been sort of like stuck in a limbo of Toll House, really, haven't we?
Yes, but I think we're going to get back onto it now.
I'm hoping so. Yes.
Yeah, it should be an interesting one. Though I haven't picked a story yet, but
Didn't you say the last time we spoke that Danny had got a story?
Danny, yeah, but she hasn't sent it through to me yet. So because of timing things and stuff like that, we'll bring it back with a couple of older stories, just to bring us back into line with it a little bit. I think.
Brilliant. Yeah,
we'll do it that way. But yeah. So I mean, it's been busy. There's been lots and lots happening, including bouts of COVID, including just busyness, general business. You've been invited around the place to do talks. I've been at the Magic Convention in Blackpool talking about narratives to people. It's been an incredibly busy and wonderful time.
Did you enjoy the Magic Convention?
I did. I thought it was great. I spent a lot of time hanging around with Paul Zennon, which, if you're into your magic, you will know that he is the man that brought street magic to the television before David Blaine did it and all that kind of stuff. He's a massive innovator. And so I spent a lot of time talking with him and loads of name dropping. And the weirdest one was hanging around with a guy called Mike Hammer, who's a Las Vegas headliner magician who came over to do his show, and he did a bit of emceeing. And he's a bit edgy. He's like an edgy comedian as well that does the magic. And he came into the bar, so we sort of hanging around with him for a bit. And then there was his like Vegas producer was there, and his Vegas manager was there. So you kind of talking to people from a world that you can't even begin to imagine. They have a completely different view on the world. It was very, very strange, but wonderful at the same time. So, yeah.
Sounds brilliant.
It's the closest I've ever got to a dead hooker without actually having to go to Las Vegas, which is quite amazing.
Brilliant. Is that one going to stay through the edits, do you think?
I'm not saying that they did. That was just purely what happens in Vegas. No, he was such a nice man as well. It's just when you talk to him off stage. But the producers, they're the ones. They are off on a different planet. They really are strange people. So,
wow.
Brilliant.
Oh. Sounds excellent.
Going again next year. I'm hooked. Best convention I've ever been to. I'm going again.
Don't blame you.
Yeah.
Go on, ask the question.
Okay, so a number of weeks ago, Ash,
yes.
What were we reading?
We were reading The Toll House by W. Jacobs.
That's right.
This is a story about a haunted house. And somebody says, "Oh, it's a haunted house. I'll bet you a sovereign you dare stay there." And somebody says, "Oh, a sovereign, I'll take that." And a group of people go and stay there. And then whilst they're staying there, a couple of them fall asleep. A couple of them wander through. And then when our hero wakes up in the morning, he notices that there's been a disturbed banister rail, and says, "It's a good job I didn't go walking in the night," and looks over it, and there's a dead friend down there. And the story ends.
Yeah, that's about it.
What do you think?
Right, I'm going to give you my absolute honest opinion on this.
Go.
I really, really enjoyed it.
Right.
But the end was a bit odd in comparative to the rest of it. But it did a huge amount of stuff that I really like in a haunted house story.
Right.
And I thought there's a lot of stuff there that a lot of people didn't used to do with haunted house stories. But that I thought it was very atmospheric. I thought the details, the way that he kind of described the oddities going on. And even the dead friend, because he actually missed as a nightmare just before that. But he actually has a nightmare of a guy running down the corridor and falling off the banister, and then he wakes up the next day to find out that somebody actually fell off the banister because he was being chased by a monster. Actually, wasn't he? It wasn't.
Yes, he was. Yes,
someone was being chased by a monster, and he managed to hide whilst the person ran past him, being chased by the monster. And then he went over the balcony, and the next day he found him dead at the bottom.
I get what you're saying, and I appreciate why you liked it, but I came away from it really, really angry, and I think I've listened to it about 4 times since we last spoke about this. And just the first thing that made me angry is it's not the monkey's paw. And W. Jacobs is known for the monkey's paw, which we did it as one of the first ones that we looked at. And it's just a brilliant piece of efficient, spooky writing.
To the point, it's such a good, amazing, iconic story that I actually commissioned a monkey's paw. So that I could read that to an audience. Yeah.
I mean, that's not just even buying the T-shirt, is it? That's sort of like pouring the monkey.
Yeah, basically.
So when you've got a story of such a high caliber, anything that he writes after that, or anything that he writes that we're comparing it with, is going to be inferior. I thought this one was nowhere near as good as the monkey's paw. I thought it was a lot of exposition. A lot of cliched stuff, but from what you've said and listening to the way that you're talking about it, I appreciate it's not so much cliches as these are prototypes that we're getting there.
I think so.
Those prototypes that the cliches have been built.
Yes, and it's one of the big things is when we go through a couple of the haunted house stuff that we've been reading, is you can see a development of the haunted house story. I mean, that's a study in itself just to look at haunted house stories, because they, it's sometimes a bit confusing of what actually is a haunted house. And what made this one different was it was a bet. Yeah. So quite often there's either an investigation going on, like in The Open Door, for example, where someone's trying to suss out what's going on, but many people have tried. This one is purely, it's got a bad rep. And, do you want to go and stay in the house? And they give them a reason to stay in the house. Because even though it's a bet, a bet with money riding on it is a really strong motivator for staying in a house when creepy stuff is going on. Yeah. And you sort of consider, I don't know, what year was it written, actually?
1909.
So 1909. So, so it's, you are coming out of, I'm trying to think of the stuff. So this is Pigeons from Hell. This is way before Shirley Jackson's The House on Haunted Hill, which are your big haunted house, affairs. And what came before it, I know you're talking about like the Castle of Gonzo or Othello or whatever it was called. And your other sort of ghostly apparition ones, even going down to that Irish fella that Bram Stoker ripped off. Please excuse, I have had COVID, so names are just so hard for me at the minute. We read the one about the house there, and we both hated it, about the hanging caretaker, and that just read like you were walking through a ghost train. Yes. Yeah. So, and the motivations weren't quite there. The motivation for that one is, it's a free room. It didn't hang together. So this one gave this really strong motivation to actually stay in the house. And it's that whole, it's a haunted house before you go into it. Not like the judge's house, which was different. That just has stories, there's more about rats in the walls and strong tea, whatever, what he was drinking. This one went, here's a big load of motivation. Go look for the ghost. And then something spooky happens with great little descriptions that went round. And yes, you could argue that it had large amounts of exposition, but I think it needed it because the exposition was almost explaining the house, much in the same way that you now get with things like The Haunting of Hill House, that, where the setup all has to be done. So there's a lot of work going into a small amount of words in this story to be able to fit that profile. But I agree with you. No, it's not as good as The Monkey's Paw.
I suppose that was my main issue with it. And then when you've got things like when the characters are being impacted by the house that they're in, they just fall asleep. And it was done so abruptly that there was no suggestion. There was no mood or anything. It's just, Bill's fallen asleep. He's very fast asleep. Try shouting in his ear, oh, that's not woken him up. I mean, in the real world, even if you'd got the motivation of money for staying in the haunted house, you'd think, fucking hell, Bill, you must be seriously pissed. We need to get you to a doctors to get your stomach pumped. Or, yeah, it just didn't seem right that people were going into this ridiculous, almost levels of, what's that fucking film? Yellow Brick Road type of falling asleep coma.
Yeah. So you got the Wizard of Oz type stuff, which is what you're referring to.
That was the one, yeah.
When they get into the field that makes them sleep.
Yes.
And maybe that's it. I mean, maybe in terms of the schemata that we're both operating on when you come into this kind of story, my schema kind of goes, he's fallen asleep because of supernatural means.
Yeah.
Or because it's just overwhelming and his brain has just shut down. So, and yours is looking for a bit more motivation behind why they've fallen asleep. So maybe I'm more forgiving of certain things that are happening in that respect. Purely because of what I'm anticipating out of a story.
And it could be that my expectations were high. Like, you sort of like go to see something and you've heard it's really good, and you just sort of like think, what the fuck did I watch?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Darwin made me watch that Everything, Everywhere, all at the same time, or whatever it's called. And he'd said it's absolutely brilliant. It's really innovative. It's great. It's striking. And I sat there and thought, this is like having a brain embolism. What the fuck am I actually watching? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't watched that yet, and I like weird movies. So I'm looking forward to seeing that one. But I know what you mean, because to be perfectly honest with you, there's a large number of kind of like, and you know me, uber geek, right? Love me geek. But some of the Marvel movies leave me cold, that people keep telling me are brilliant. And one of which is Civil War. And everyone keeps telling me how brilliant Civil War is, and I can't see it. And part of that's because I've read the comic book of Civil War.
The comic book was fantastic.
Yeah, the comic book was so sensational that it didn't live up to it, even to a tenth of it in my head. So in me, it's not good enough. Nowhere near good enough to be called Civil War. And everybody keeps telling me, not everybody, the metaphorical everybody keeps telling me that it's an absolutely brilliant film. And so there is that. And it also works the other way as well. When someone tells you something is utter crap and it's not as bad as everyone tells you it is, you kind of get that, actually, that was all right, Yeah.
Yeah, you do. And I get what you're saying. I don't think Civil War is the best of the Avengers movies. I enjoyed it, but then again, I enjoy the Avengers movies.
Yes.
Some of the stuff Marvel have been producing lately, though, has been absolute shite. I mean, you were saying the other day that Wakanda Forever lasted forever. Yeah,
it seemed to be 2 hours of people just talking. And it really was. It was just like, I have a soft spot for Batman versus Superman, the extended edition, which everyone tells me is the worst film ever made. And you're looking at it going, it really isn't The Happening. That's one of the worst films ever made. It's not the best film ever made either. And it's almost like a straightforward, ordinary, it's okay. It doesn't exist anymore. Everything either has to be the best thing ever or the worst thing ever. But all the stuff that everybody complains, all the Marvel fans complain about Batman versus Superman, it being dark, it being too much exposition, it being people talking, is Wakanda Forever. It's just like, it's 2 hours of people talking and then a set piece at the end. And it's like, they're better than that. The first Avengers movie proves that they are better than that. And I don't understand what they were trying to. And it's not only that, it's one thing having two people talking. I've seen plenty of film where you've only got two people talking. But the dialogue has to be absolutely on point. I mean, you have to be watching something akin to a stage play that really draws you in, and all that sort of stuff. And Wakanda Forever didn't really do that. It didn't really do that. And that's where, like I say, but is it the worst movie I've ever seen? No, it's not the worst film I've ever seen. It just took a long time to watch. It seemed to be overlong for no reason. And it's not the worst thing I've ever seen. It was meh, that's about it, really. But the best I can say.
I suppose, but you mentioned in dialogue, it was the dialogue within that story that didn't quite work for me. The characterization through dialogue seemed too contrived and too forced. The whole idea that the guy as they're approaching the building, rather than trying to sneak in through a window, says, "Oh, well, I'm going to knock on the door," and enter like a proper person. And you just think, wow, canoning it much, yeah.
The interesting thing is, I agree with you. I thought the dialogue wasn't that brilliant. I actually think he gets away with it in The Monkey's Paw, because I don't think the dialogue is actually brilliant in The Monkey's Paw.
No, it's not.
It's very, everybody sound. I mean, if you put on Monty Python type accents, it's very funny, to do that.
Yeah.
But it's the story and the ending that makes Monkey's Paw. In particular, the ending. The ending was outrageously good in A Monkey's Paw. Yeah. Where here, the ending is outrageously abrupt. It's one of those, and this is what I say. Yes, I enjoyed the story. Is it perfect? Far from it. The end of it, and we've commented on this at turn of the century type stories before, where they seem to go, I'm writing. Oh, hang on, it's the end. And that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he looked over it's all this wonderful description of him going down and finding the banister missing, and he looked down at a dead body. The end.
Putting the fin into fin de siècle. Wow.
Yeah.
French jokes on here, yeah.
There you go. Look, that's culture. That's culture right there.
Yeah. It was incredibly abrupt, and there were a lot of strengths in there, and I think as an example of a haunted house story, it's one that I would definitely point people towards. Not necessarily people I like, but I would point people. No, I think it's towards it.
I think it's a really good progression, because I say one of the best haunted house stories ever written is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. It is an astonishing piece of work. However, we're now putting the pieces together of how we got to Shirley Jackson's
you're right.
Wonderful story, and this is one of those pieces. I think it seems to be forgotten about because I think it's forgotten about because The Monkey's Paw is so great, right? Yeah. So I think that's where a lot of it's being looked at in that way, and so I think it is one of the stepping stones. I think you can go back to The Open Door. That's one of the stepping stones. The Judge's House, one of the stepping stones, which actually is the rewrite of that Irish fella. Oh, I can't remember his name. Of the curious incident of such and such a street. It's on the list. Just go if
it's not Le Fanu, is it?
Yeah, him. That is it.
Sheridan Le Fanu.
Yes. So he had. We had.
Was he Irish?
Yeah, he's Irish. I think. Yes, he is.
Why has he got a French name?
Because he's Irish.
All right.
Yeah. You can't get more Irish thing to do than have a French name. So that story, which was rewritten as The Judge's House, effectively, by Bram Stoker, and so you can see this evolution of the haunted house story going on there, and so I think this is another one of those stepping stones.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think it's almost as though we've got an ontogeny of the horror story, and it's growing, and we can sort of see the intertextual DNA, as it were.
Yes.
As it's that's an interesting way of looking at it. So, what actually constitutes a haunted house story? Does The Shining fall under that? Yes,
and The Shining really does come under that. Well, one is there are ghosts.
Right.
Also, he has a reason that he can't run away from the house. They're snowed in. He's got a reason to go there in the first place because he's got a job. And then they're snowed in and can't leave. So when spooky shenanigans start up, he's going mad, depending on how you read it, but he's going mad. And then, so that's keeping him there. So he starts getting an emotional attachment to the property whilst all the other spooky shenanigans is going on. And there's no other way for anyone else to escape. And to me, that's why the Amityville doesn't work for me, because they've only been in it about a week when spooky stuff happens and you'd leave.
But would you? I remember reading in Dan's Macabre, Stephen King was talking about that and saying with the Amityville Horror that when he saw it in the cinema, he heard somebody behind saying, "Good God, imagine the bills." And that was the horror for them. But when you sort of moved into a new property, in that case, escaping from it, you're tied there unless you've got family that you can go and live with. You're screwed if it
Well, no,
turns out.
yeah, but you are. It's one of those sort of things of it's unless you are really, really tied to a house. I mean, the Poltergeist, for example, in Poltergeist, they do it really well by kidnapping the kid. So
Yeah.
when Spooky Shenanigans starts up, it's like, oh, there's weird stuff going on here. Let me just go and find about, which you get. There's going to be an initial point of curiosity.
May I just say that on this podcast we don't condone kidnapping kids as a way of keeping.
Also,
Yeah.
in fairness, and and to make sure that everything broads, there are other kidnapping kid movies other than Poltergeist. No, but that's what they do in the film.
Yeah.
In the story, it's really, really clever because they're just at the point of going, we've had enough of this. We're getting out of here. When the kid goes into the house and then they send the older daughter away and they actually send the son away as well to sort it all out. So they create that tension for why you stay in the house. Where with Amityville, it starts off with a bit of blood coming out of the taps. Blood coming out of the taps is one of those really early indicators where you go, let's go and spend the night in a motel, hun. Let's get it back on the market now.
Yeah, let's go out and buy a couple of tents.
Yeah. Even live in the garden. They had a boat shed. It's that kind of, there were so many different things of, no, we've got blood coming out the taps. We've got things scraping on the floors. Let's go upstairs to bed.
So for you, a haunted house story needs to be something that not only has ghosts within the property, because I'm worried sometimes that haunted house means that some people will have the mindset that it can only be a house. It can't be a hotel, it can't be a hospital, it can't be this particular area. So,
which is incorrect. It's incorrect, actually, because there's also, I think Event Horizon is a haunted house movie, and that's on a spaceship.
So, get that. And that's the second part of it, where the non-ghostly characters are tied to that location. They've got no way of escaping it or no logical out.
Yes.
So staying because of a bribe, just like House of the Long Shadows, the Hammer film, where it was a writer who said that he would be able to write a story in 24 hours or 48 hours if he was in a haunted house. Again, you've got that whole bet notion that's going to keep him in there. Yeah, I like that. So, Shirley Jackson, what keeps them in there then?
They're parapsychologists. They're studying it.
Right. So when they made the film of that, weren't they all shut in, or was that a different?
Well, they are. The guy tells him to lock the gate.
Right.
So they are locked into it, but they do sort of like come outside. In the 1963 version, they do all come outside the house at the end of it when Nell dies. But the whole reason for being there in the first place is it is already a haunted house and we're going to study it. So they're there for that stuff to happen. And what they didn't realize was the way that it was going to seduce Nell and that, and sort of drag her into it. That's where that comes in. And she stays there because she starts having these feelings of wanting to be, the house makes her feel like she belongs there, even though it actually just wants to kill her and take her soul into the house itself. She's getting those feelings of home. So she's got this emotional attachment to the house, whilst everyone else around who's studying it and starts thinking, well, hang on, we've got to send Nell away now because, this is not looking right. And that's where those essences come in.
Are we going to be looking at any more haunted house stories, do you think?
I think we will. I'm going to find some more. I mean, I like doing it as movies. I mean, if you want to do a movie, right? Because there's a haunted house film called The Changeling, starring George C. Scott.
Right.
Directed by Peter Maddock, 1979, 1980, something like that. And I think that would be a great one for us to look at because, for my money, it is the greatest haunted house film of all time.
Changeling.
The Changeling, starring George C. Scott.
1979. No, 79.
Yeah. It was advertised as being, first there was The Exorcist, then there was The Omen, now there is The Changeling. And it was that whole horror movie with a big name actor in it. But I'm not going to tell you too much about it right now. All I'll say is it is the only horror film that still makes my blood run cold at a certain sequence. And there are certain parts of it that has the lead up to it, the reasoning behind it, the reason for staying, and the actual story behind everything is really, really fantastic. And I know that we have at least 2 listeners that will agree with me when I say it's like the greatest ghost movie ever made. And it's so underrated. It doesn't get talked about as much as it really should do.
Can we just go back? We've actually got 2 listeners now.
We've got two listeners. Yeah, there's 2 listeners I know of that actually do that. Yeah.
Not just you and I when we're
no. So I suppose we could actually say that's 4. And if we do it the old, we do it the conservative way of counting, each person listening actually has 2 ears. So that would actually make it, so that would be 4 times 4, wouldn't it? 16.
Yeah, that's a referendum.
16 ears actually listen to this.
Right. So yeah. So is that what we will be discussing?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Let's switch it up a little bit on that one then. So at home you can get it. It does exist on Amazon Prime. I don't think it's free, but it's not very expensive either, and it's a lovely 2K restoration of it. I have it on Blu-ray because it's a film that I have to own. It's just an incredible piece of work. It's also the reason I'm scared of empty wheelchairs. I've always stated I have a phobia of empty wheelchairs.
You have several times.
This is the film that gave me a phobia of empty wheelchairs. There you go. So I'm going to put this one on you now. So it is out there. I don't know if there are any other ways of getting these kind of films. Shudder have it. So if you've got a Shudder account, they definitely have the Changeling on there as well.
Right.
It is there.
Is the 1980 version likely to be the same as the 79?
That's it, yes. It's 1979-80 it gets kind of put out at.
Right. What about the 2008 version?
The 2008 is not the same film at all. That's actually who is it in that one? Is it Michelle Pfeiffer?
I don't know.
It's not even a ghost story, that one.
Really?
Yeah.
But it's got the same title, just to confuse imbeciles like me.
And the idea, I take it you know what a changeling is.
I'm going to find out when I watch this.
Yeah.
Yes.
It goes back to the folk tales and stuff like that. An original changeling is actually a baby that has been swapped over for another child, which is usually a fairy child. So a fairy child gets put to be brought up by humans, and the human child is stolen by the fairies. That's where the original changeling stories come from.
I look forward to finding Maddie on this video.
Well, they didn't quite bring the other side of it, did they? That was the whole thing. Oh, my friend Ryan Gleason did a really good one. Actually, he did actually at his comedy club, Comedy Station. I'll do a bit of advertising. Comedy Station in Blackpool. If you really want to see where comedy is at the moment, and if you're one of those people that says you can't tell jokes like that anymore, Comedy Station, you'll probably find some of these jokes going on. And he does crowd work because he MCs. Ryan Gleason does the MCing of it, and he was doing the whole what's your name? And she went Madeline. He went, found you. So there you go. Brilliant. He's very, very good. Very good. So the Changeling, like I say, it's a cracking film. It is on a par with The Exorcist and The Omen, I think, in terms of that brilliant, from that period, golden period of horror films, and nobody's topped it in my mind. And Danny, funny enough, who will be sending us a story when I pull my head out of my ass. She's a massive, massive fan of it. And I mentioned it at the Horror Society, funnily enough, recently. So anybody from the Horror Society watching this, get The Changeling watched now. Because next week, there will be spoilers because you can't talk about this film without spoiling it. So you need to watch the film. And we'll do this again next week when we start talking about it. You have to watch the film to be able to, because it will spoil it. There's some beautiful moments in this that the first time, I'm a bit jealous if you've never watched this film before and you're watching it for the first time.
That's me. You're jealous of me. Good. That's all I need.
So there you go. So that's next week. So just to round up this one, I think it's an interesting story. I enjoyed it. You didn't enjoy it so much, and I understand why.
Yeah, I think I went in with my expectations too high, and each time I tried getting into it, it was just not fully working for me. But yeah, I think you're right. It's more of a prototype than a cliche.
Yes,
and that's how I should have been looking at it. Yeah.
But even then, you can understand it. Like you say, when you look at the quality of the Monkey's Paw, then you are you can't help it but compare to that and not be so objective. I think in the mood I was in when I first listened to it, I was in that kind of, my mind was nicely blank and ready to go. So I had, my preconceived ideas were completely different at that point. But I think, read it. Definitely have a read of it, because it does have that stepping stone into other stuff. And actually next week's going to be very interesting to see what we think.
Looking forward to this.
Brilliant.
Thank you, mate.
Thanks, Ash. That was great. I really enjoyed that.
Likewise. See you in a bit.
Bye-bye. Bye.